On April 20th, 2026, Apple announced that Tim Cook would step down as Chief Executive Officer on August 31st, and that John Ternus, the company's Senior Vice President of Hardware Engineering, would assume the role on September 1st. The announcement was handled with the particular choreography that Apple applies to everything consequential: controlled language, a tone of calm inevitability, a board statement describing Ternus as the right person to lead Apple into its next chapter. Analysts called it the right choice. The markets barely moved. Cook spoke warmly. Ternus spoke humbly. Everyone performed their part with precision. And underneath the announcement, largely unreported in the coverage that followed, was a structural tension that may define the most consequential decade in Apple's history. The company whose brand is built on the seamless integration of hardware and software just promoted its hardware engineer to solve what is fundamentally a software problem. To understand why this matters, you need to start not with Tim Cook's retirement announcement, but with a Sunday evening in August 1997. Apple is 90 days from bankruptcy. The products are a disaster. Dozens of models with overlapping purposes, no coherent identity, no clear reason for a customer to choose any of them. The board has just ousted the CEO who oversaw this collapse. Steve Jobs, who founded Apple, was pushed out in 1985 and has spent 12 years building Next and Pixar. He returns not as a savior, but as a consultant, and within weeks is operating as the de facto leader of a company that has lost its animating force. What Jobs does in the following 3 years is not management. It is curation. He kills nearly everything. The Newton, most of the Mac line, the clones, the peripheral businesses. He imposes a simplicity on the company's product philosophy that is almost violent. 4 products: consumer desktop, professional desktop, consumer laptop, professional laptop. The rest, gone. And then, from that cleared ground, he builds. The iMac, the iPod, the iTunes Store, the iPhone, the iPad. Jobs did not manage Apple through these years. He decided what was worth existing and killed everything that was not. The specific genius of that period was not operational. It was curatorial. When Jobs died in October 2011, he left behind a company with extraordinary operational capability, a clear product hierarchy, a fiercely loyal customer base, and a roadmap he had partially shared with his successor. Tim Cook understood precisely what he was and was not. He was not Steve Jobs. He was not a product visionary. He was the best operations executive in the technology industry, the person who had built Apple's supply chain into a competitive advantage so durable that competitors spent years trying to replicate it, and largely failed. Under Cook's leadership, Apple became the most valuable company in the world. Its market capitalization went from approximately $300 billion to $3 trillion. He launched the Apple Watch, creating a new product category. He built Apple services into a revenue stream that Jobs had never developed. He managed the China manufacturing relationship through extraordinary geopolitical complexity without a major disruption. He extended the iPhone's commercial dominance for 15 years after the device was first launched. By any conventional metric of corporate performance, Tim Cook was an exceptional CEO. What Cook could not do, and what the board has now handed to John Ternus as his defining challenge, is replace Steve Jobs as the person who decides what is worth existing next. The products launched under Cook were refinements and extensions of what Jobs had created, rather than reinventions of categories. The iPhone grew thinner, faster, and more expensive. The Mac acquired Apple Silicon. The watch acquired health sensors. The HomePod arrived and departed. The Vision Pro launched at $3,500 and was widely described as a product that solved a problem consumers had not identified, and priced at a level that excluded the audience who might have been willing to try it. None of these were failures of execution. They were, arguably, the consequence of a company that had become extraordinarily good at executing a vision it had stopped being able to originate. The artificial intelligence failure is the most consequential expression of this gap. Between 2022 and 2025, large language models emerged as the dominant competitive battlefield in consumer technology. The companies that led this transition, OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, Meta, made AI capability the central axis of their consumer product value propositions. Apple's response was Apple Intelligence, a suite of AI features announced in 2024 that reviewers consistently described as the least capable major AI offering from any large technology company. Siri, which had been the first mainstream voice assistant when it launched in 2011, had not kept pace with the models that followed it. Apple's own machine learning infrastructure, which had been excellent for on-device tasks, was not competitive with the frontier models developed by its competitors. The company's response to this gap was to form partnerships with OpenAI and with Google to provide AI capabilities that Apple's own models could not deliver. The company whose founding brand promise is that its products work together seamlessly, that the integration of hardware and software creates an experience no competitor can match, was outsourcing its intelligence layer to the two companies most directly competing with it for the future of consumer technology. John Ternus is 50 years old. He joined Apple in 2001 and spent 25 years engineering its physical products. He led the transition from Intel processors to Apple Silicon, a multi-year program that required extraordinary coordination across design, manufacturing, and software teams, and that delivered performance improvements the industry had not anticipated. The M-series chips transformed the Mac from a competitive also-ran to the most capable personal computer in its category. This was Ternus's signature achievement as hardware engineering chief, and it was genuinely extraordinary. It was also fundamentally an execution achievement. The decision that Apple should build its own silicon, the strategic insight that doing so would transform the Mac's competitive position, was made by Steve Jobs years before the transition. Ternus delivered an exceptional implementation of a strategic direction that had been set before he led it. The question Apple's board has not answered publicly, and that analysts are now asking with increasing urgency, is who will set the strategic direction for the next decade? Who decides whether to build Apple's own frontier AI models or continue depending on OpenAI and Google? Who decides what the successor to the iPhone is? Who decides whether spatial computing is a category worth continuing? These are not engineering questions. They are the questions that determine whether Apple, in 2035, is still the world's most valuable company, or has begun the decline that finds every technology company that outlives its founding vision. Ternus is an exceptional engineer and has earned the trust of every person who has worked with him. The question is not whether he is capable. The question is whether the job that Apple needs done in the next decade is the job that his career has prepared him to do. Follow now. The story of where Apple goes from here is unfolding in real time. This channel covers the corporate decisions that most reporting treats as settled when the most important questions are still open. Follow so you do not miss what comes next. One detail in the Ternus announcement has received almost no coverage. Cook did not simply retire. He is staying on as executive chairman, keeping him involved in strategic direction without operational responsibility. It is the same structure Jobs used when he handed the CEO title to Cook in 2011. The board wants Cook's institutional knowledge available as Ternus settles in. It is a reasonable decision. It also means the two most senior figures at Apple during the period when the AI gap opened are both present as the organization attempts to close it. Whether that continuity helps or compounds the problem is the question Apple's next 3 years will answer.